All right, next up, we have Lowell King. Lowell King farms 900 acres of hay, corn, small grain, and cover crops and grazes 200 cow-calf pairs and custom grazes cattle and sheep along with several other family members near Fruita. Fruita's in Colorado for those of you that don't know that. They practice the 6 soil health principles on every acre and are leaders and coach other farmers and ranchers in implementing improved grazing practices, no-till in-furrow irrigation, and diverse crop rotations. Lowell is also a partner in Lifetime Ag, selling ESH no-till drills and no-till creasers, cover crop and perennial seed, and consulting services. Please help me welcome Lowell to the stage.
Well, hi, folks. I'm happy to be here. I think this conference they put on here at Boulder is pretty neat. I've never been to Boulder before, but I'm excited about being here and sharing with you. So we're going to talk about this regenerative ag problem-solving strategies, and I am impressed with the opportunities we have as farmers and ranchers to be stewards. And I'm a young earth creation believer, and in Genesis, God commanded us to care for, dress, and keep the garden. And I think that's part of an important step in what we're doing is caring for and actually improving the resources we've been given. And where I feel like farming has gone wrong is when we undress the garden or undress the soil. We till it, we don't plant, or we just till and plant. What we're trying to do is implement the 6 soil health principles and actually regenerate and improve. So I am your farmer. I grew up on a dairy farm in Pennsylvania. We got Western hay shipped in and we resold to other farmers. And I was tired of milking cows, and I said, I want to live where we can grow hay like Colorado can grow hay. So in 2005, I had opportunity to move to Fruita there and start some custom farming with my brother, and it didn't take us long to start renting land and then start purchasing some land. And we farmed just like everyone else in the area with high tillage, single crop a year, and no cover crops, we ran some cattle in the fields, but then of course had a lot of tillage that went along with that, trying to deal with compaction. In 2016, I attended a soil health conference in Montrose, Colorado, where Gabe Brown was the keynote speaker, and I was interested in finding a better way to farm, and a lot of the stuff he talked about there was fairly new to me, although my dad was a conservation farmer. He grew cover crops there in Pennsylvania and used a lot of organic fertilizer and such. And so I was somewhat familiar with that, and so then when Gabe explained it all, it made sense, and it really excited me, and we went and bought a no-till drill that spring and started on this journey. So as I said, I'm your farmer. Not your scientist. I can help you connect to what the scientist is saying, but I want to show you from a farmer's perspective what we see happening as we implement these practices on every acre that we care for. Okay, sorry, I didn't find out how to run this thing. The green arrow? Okay, sure. So in school, I studied all the way to 8th grade. I wanted to get home and drive tractors and farm. So that's my education. But one of the key things that I think I learned in 8th grade that I think is missing in a lot of study is to connect a problem and a solution, or to use simple observation. And one of the things I studied in 8th grade was problem-solving strategies. And so it takes you through these steps. Think, how can I, what can I? Step 2 is to plan. What steps do I take? What do I stop doing or start doing? Then we solve. We get to work and we actually implement our findings or what we've figured out by these thinking and planning steps. And then, of course, we check our work. Did I come to the right conclusion? Does my answer actually solve a problem? So step 1, do this on your own farm. Step 2, collaborate with classmates, your neighboring farmers or your customers. And you'll often hear, well, there is no solution to this problem we're facing in agriculture. It's just, this is the way it is. Sometimes in step 3, finding the answer, sometimes the reason you can't find the answer is because it's so simple that you overlook it. And remember, there's never a wrong way to find the right answer. When you need to add, you cannot subtract and find the right answer. And then step 4 in your checking, don't compare. It's good to compare with others, but don't just compare with your others and say it must be right because, 10 of my other classmates have this same answer. Maybe you all subtracted when you were supposed to add to find the answer. Excuse me. So this is a big one, and it's been talked about earlier, about, a mindset. It takes a shift in paradigm. So what we're going to look at in this talk is how conventional ag looks at solving problems and how regenerative ag looks at solving problems. And I want to be clear, I don't want it to be us here in this group against big bad conventional ag out there, okay? I was there 10 years ago doing the best I knew using conventional methods. So it can kind of feel like that maybe a little here, but I want to be clear, we need to bring everyone in the room together on it. My dad, as I mentioned, was kind of an innovator. He, before I was born, he hired a helicopter to come in and spread cereal rye on standing corn. That would have been in the late 70s. He always planted cover crop after corn harvest in the fall, spread it with a fertilizer spreader, and then just disc it lightly, and then in the spring, plowed that under as green manure. So my dad was doing some of these neat things in the late 70s already. And one of the things, I'm curious, I'm sure there's a number of farmers, how many of these tractors that you see here, how many people are familiar with Deutz tractors? Okay. How many are familiar with John Deere tractors? Okay. So now John Deere isn't necessarily conventional and Deutz regenerative, but I'm going to make a point with it. In the farm crisis in the 80s, my dad was dairy farming. He had just bought a farm. Interest went crazy. He was paying 18% interest. And so when he needed a new tractor, a new Deutz tractor was $4,000 cheaper than the exact same model of John Deere. So he bought a Deutz, and he bought it because it was fuel efficient, it was cheaper, lower maintenance, and this is actually this picture was taken about 8 years ago here in western Colorado on my brother's farm. This was our hay making fleet. We still have those tractors. of my 6 brothers. There's 22 Deutz tractors in our family across the U.S., and there are also 12 no-till drills among my 5 brothers. So if you can follow through what's going on there, tractors with good resale value, like John Deere had and has, do not buy a farm. And what he did was he found ways to be innovative, and he kind of passed that on to us in some areas. Regenerative ag is taking what would cost you money and actually make you money. Like a lot of farmers talk about residue as trash. Well, figure out how to make that trash make you money with livestock and ground cover. So what we're going to do is go through some of these and look at the different mindsets. You know, conventional ag says, well, this is the way we've always done it. It is what it is. I can't do anything about it. You focus on yields and your inputs increase. Regenerative ag says, how can we add life? How can we more closely align with nature? God's design of how the forests and the meadows and all that work. And it's a focus on biology, and what happens is when you focus on biology, yield follows. So here's the first problem we had in our farming when we started out in 2016, when we started no-tilling. This was what we started for. We were spending a ridiculous amount of time in tractors doing tillage work, and we thought, okay, we can save a lot of fuel, a lot of man hours by no-tilling instead of doing all this tillage. And so it started from the economic side, and what is so exciting is we had no clue where it could take us. Alan Williams says it like this: you have cascading and compounding effects from every decision you make, and you'll see that in these next slides as we go through. And you know, the economic side of it, the price of fertilizer, the price of fuel, the price of farm equipment is not going down. Nothing, it's only going to change one direction there. So the only thing you can do is to reduce your inputs and hopefully increase your profit. What we're going to look at, these next pictures show the extreme of what we're talking about. Economics here on this problem, the conventional mindset or solution is to rent more farm ground, buy bigger and faster equipment. Regenerative says, let's reduce passes, double crop, reduce overhead. That will actually bring the economics we're looking at. So a big problem we had, and this was our number one question we started out with: if we quit doing tillage, how are we going to deal with soil compaction? So on the left, you have a rut from a silage truck, a heavy, 20-ton silage truck running in a furrow irrigated field. There's only one way to fix that problem, and that is tillage, right? So you till deeper and more often to fix your compaction. Regenerative ag says use no-till so you're not destroying soil structure. Keep living roots there with cover crops or your cash crop, and control your traffic. And we have a unique situation there. I'm curious, how many here use furrow irrigation to irrigate? Okay, so a few. So we are almost 100% furrow irrigated in western Colorado. So we have 9 inches of rainfall. We don't grow anything or farm anything without irrigation. We have a couple sprinklers, but when we started this, we were only in furrow irrigated. And so it's impossible, right? You have to do tillage to form your beds. You have to do tillage to get rid of the residue so that you can run water down the furrows. And if you're not familiar with furrow irrigation, it's as simple as you have pipelines at the high point of your field, and you are pushing water, gravity flow from one end of the field all the way to the other to irrigate your crop. And so that was one of our big concerns. How are we going to maintain these irrigation furrows? How are we going to get water from one end of the field with all kinds of cover crop residue, corn stalks and whatnot? And so these are all things that Elizabeth talked about, like the mental. And of course, you talk about your neighbors, and they're like, "You're nuts. That'll never work." Okay, well, it won't work. So what we did was we thought, well, we have alfalfa fields that we keep in production without doing tillage for 6 years. Why can't we take that same model and do that with corn or wheat or whatever? And the other thing that we always were intrigued with, when we would go to plow a field that had been plowed every year, it plowed really hard. We have a lot of heavy adobe clay, and it would take a tremendous amount of power. When we'd go plow an alfalfa field that hadn't been tilled in 6 years, we could shift up a couple gears and plow. And it's like, what's going on here? Well, it's as simple as a soil structure, and the compaction was an issue because we hadn't been collapsing our soil. So now we're actually farming. We never tear out our beds. So anytime we run tractors, drills, combines, whatever, we're actually running on row crop spacing. So our tractors are only driving in the irrigation furrow and not on top of the bed where we're driving. We're trying to figure out how to train our cows to do that yet too. Okay, here's another problem. Let me say this too, that if conventional ag had always produced a bountiful 100% crop, we would probably still be doing conventional tillage and so on. But what would happen is you would have scenarios like you see on the left where you do 10 tillage passes and have the soil just perfect, and then you run your water down the furrows, and it may not sub over, and it may not germinate your corn. And so you have these big patches of bare field where it will not grow corn that year because the water didn't wick in because you had no soil structure. And so the conventional solution to that is go run rotary hose, let your water run for days at a time through the field, because we're in western Colorado, we got plenty of water. I mean, it's cheap and it's almost free and all kinds of good water rights, right? And the other thing was to hope for no rain, because ironically we should be praying for rain, right? But no, if it rains and you had tilled, you had a terrible amount of crust on your soil, and so it wouldn't germinate up through. Regenerative ag says, again, no till. Quit destroying your soil structure and have living roots there, and then provide cover on the soil surface to protect that surface. And we would often plant at 38,000 population on corn when we're trying to end up with 32,000 because it wasn't, we knew that it just wouldn't all come through. Here was another problem we had, was conventional is clods. And some people think I'm big-headed, but that's just a normal-sized baseball cap right there. And that is a clod, that is a dirt clod in someone's new seeding alfalfa field that had been tilled probably 10 times, and it was just so compacted and hard that when they made their furrows or creased out, it pulled that big clod up, and that's laying on the bed of a brand newly planted alfalfa field. And somebody mentioned about taking lots of pictures. Take lots of pictures of whatever you do and wherever you are in your journey, because when we were farming conventionally, I didn't know to take these pictures in our own fields, because I knew it was a problem, but I didn't know there was a solution for it. So I didn't know to document it. So I had to go around, and I stop along the road and I look around and make sure that this guy isn't seeing me, and I sneak out and throw my baseball cap in his field and take this picture, because I didn't know to take that picture on my own farm at the time, but we had that same problem. So a lot of these conventional ag pictures are actually from other farmers, but it was all us in 2010. These were all problems that we were dealing with. So what's the solution to, it's interesting. I try to go back to where we were, where they are, some of them are yet today, and think about it from their perspective, because one of the questions they ask is, how do you deal with clods or smooth up your fields? Well, don't make them rough in the first place. If you aren't doing that tillage and pulling up these clods, there aren't any clods to get rid of. Regenerative ag solution to clods is no-till. Keep living roots in the soil. Quit destroying your structure. Okay, ruts is another one we had. In that picture on the left, you can see a sprayer track that went across the headland spraying the corn, and it smashed the bed out. And so the next time that farmer goes to water, he's going to have water running all over the place instead of down the furrows. And so you end up having lots of guys out there with shovels opening that back up for the next time. And let's just call it quits, and you deal with dry spots in your fields, and you deal with rough spots. I remember one farmer I was running, we did some custom chopping, and I came across the headland with the chopper running 4 or 5 miles per hour, and that sprayer rut was so deep that I thought the wheel was falling off the combine or chopper, and I realized it was just his sprayer rut from when he had passed across the beds, and it was too soft. No-till regenerative ag solution is no-till. Quit destroying your soil structure and keep living roots in the soil. Conventional ag spends billions of dollars researching on how to breed for a taller dog because they have a mud problem. Regenerative ag says, let's figure out why there's mud here in the first place, right? What's the big deal? And here's a quote: "We cannot solve today's problems in ag by continuing to use the same tools that created them in the first place." And a lot of these problems you see here have to do with tillage equipment and tearing up your soil structure and destroying biology. And so then farmers think, well, I need to fix this problem, and they use that same tool that caused the problem in the first place. Here's another one. We have this problem with poor water infiltration, and this is one of the most disheartening things when we were doing conventional tillage, and I still see it today on some local farmers there. We have the bed, so this is probably about 30 inches, so there's about there's 30 inches between each watermark or furrow or crease or whatever you want to call it, where the water flows down through the field. And with extensive tillage and the soil structure destroyed, the water does not want to sub to the center of the bed. It wants to run to the low spot at the bottom of the field. And so there'd be times where this picture on the left is actually one I bought a farm in 2017 that part of it had been deserted because none of the other tenants or farmers could get water to sub on that field. It was fairly much shale, and it had a fairly steep slope, and so when you turn the water on, it erodes out the furrow, as you can see in that one little spot there. Whoops, now I hit the wrong leader, so the red is back. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So you can see erosion right there, but right over here is dry as a bone. And that water, this was the first crop I planted on my farm in that field, and we had tilled it because it needed leveled and it needed the furrows GPS'd in. But that water had run for over 3 days, continuous, and it only subbed into this far, and then that whole center was dry as a bone. And you can see where that long-legged dog was frantically digging right there, and he couldn't find any mud. So conventional ag solution to that is, well, just keep water and run water. I see farmers that run water for 7 days in one set. And we used to do it too, because that's the only way you could do it. And then you finally turn your water off and you say, it is what it is. And I say, actually, it's what you made it. So that same field now, after, that was in 17, so 7 years of continuous cover cropping and row crop and livestock integration, that same field irrigates in 12 to 18 hour sets, where at that time it was 72 hours and still didn't sub across. Regenerative ag solution to this is no-till and keep living roots in the soil. And what concerns me about this is that the situation we are in the Southwest and on the Colorado River, everybody knows what's going on there. And yet we just we got cheap water, it's mine, I'm gonna just use it no matter what. And we crossed an exciting line this fall. On our district, though, we have a certain amount of shares with every acre of farmland we have, and then we can use overage that we just pay for, and it's not real expensive. So a lot of guys just use their share up, and then they just buy overage, and it's peanuts, and they just go on with that. And this year was the first on my farm that I crossed that line where we're actually farming more acres, and we had no overage whatsoever. I didn't even use up all my own shares this year. So that was a pretty exciting step that we crossed. Regenerative ag solution, no-till, keep living roots. Soil structure. Again, there's so many of these that just have to do with good, healthy soil structure. Okay, another problem is soil erosion. And you can see in those furrows on this side, they wash out, and look at the tailwater running out. It's just muddy brown, and you can guess that there's a lot of topsoil and a lot of nutrients that are ending up. Our friends in California are enjoying some of that, and they hate the salt that we put in because of that as well. But regenerative ag solution is no-till and cover crops. Keep living roots and keep your soil covered. And this was one of the most exciting things I saw when we switched is when the water used to run out of our fields chocolate brown, and you knew you were losing topsoil and nutrients that you were never gonna see again, to now we run very clear water out the tail end of our field. And if the monsoons get far enough north to us and put a lot of muddy water in the river, and we're irrigating with muddy water, it comes in our field muddy, and by the time it flows through all the residue and cover crop roots or cash crop or whatever, it runs out the bottom end just as clear as could be. And so we're actually filtering out sediment onto our field. Okay, another problem we have there is extremely high salts, and the solution with conventional farmers in our area is just water more to push the salts down. You plant higher population because you know some of the plants aren't going to germinate because it's so salty. You fertilize more, hoping to get them to go. And regenerative ag says just keep living roots there all the time, and plant salt-tolerant cover crop species. Something will grow. We have places that used to be just big bare spots in our fields that now have, we can grow Cubam clover or barley or triticale, something will grow in the mix. And so just plant something that is okay with that kind of soil. Okay, another problem was lack of nutrients, and again, we got conventional ag on the left side where we've got tons of fertilizer running out the bottom in the first irrigation. And so you put extra fertilizer on because you're gonna know you're gonna run some out the bottom. That way you for sure have enough to get what it needs. And you deep rip so that hopefully some of them, you know, you can access the ones down deep. And regenerative ag says, here, let's keep living roots there to capture and cycle nutrients and graze or grow diverse cover crops to increase biology. And I am impressed, even my local fertilizer salesman, he'll tell me that if I buy 1152O phosphorus, only 20% of it ever becomes plant available. The other 80% is just not plant available. So for our main cash crop in our operation, we're selling premium high dollar horse hay. So if I sell you horse hay and I say, okay, here's this $350 a ton bale of hay, and it's gonna do what you want for your horse, but your horse is only gonna be able to eat 20% of it. The rest is it's just not available to your horse. How much horse hay do you think I'm gonna sell? Well, people keep on buying 1152O. Okay, another problem is weed pressure. So just till more, spray more often. Regenerative ag says keep living roots in the soil. You get ahead of those weeds. Plant a cover crop before the weeds have a chance to germinate. And use cover crops to increase your fungal to bacteria ratio. And we've seen, it is so amazing what we've seen with that, where we used to have a lot of trouble with cheatgrass in our alfalfa hay, and we have almost zero cheatgrass ever on any of our fields here the last 4 or 5 years. And we're fairly convinced it's because we've changed the fungal to bacteria ratio in our soil by simply improving our soil health. And so regenerative ag says, let's find a solution, right? Like, don't just keep saying, well, it is what it is. These weeds are just gonna grow and that's just the way it is. And one of the famous things I hear from my fellow colleagues is that the irrigation water, there's so many of these weed seeds come in the irrigation water. That's our problem. And I'm just wanting to say, you know what? There's billions of weed seeds lying there dormant, waiting for you to create the right environment for them to germinate. Quit creating the right environment, and you won't see those weeds. Okay, pests is another problem. So, of course, tillage comes up. You need a till to get rid of these pests. You spray more pesticides. That's how you'll fix the problem. Regenerative ag says, no, actually, just keep living roots there and improve the soil. And your plant will just be healthier because you have better soil structure. And use cover crops to promote beneficials. And we would have never, in 2010, we would have never dreamed of not spraying alfalfa for alfalfa weevil in the spring. Now, we're probably at about 80% of our fields. We don't spray in the spring because weevil only attack unhealthy plants. And so we've improved our soil, and now we have healthier plants, and so now the weevil aren't near as much of a problem. Okay, so another problem is very few pollinators. The only one I could think of for this is conventional ag says it is what it is. Who needs bees? regenerative ag says, keep living roots in the soil. No till, so you harvest one crop today and plant today or tomorrow the next crop. And use diverse cover crops with flowering species in them. We have beekeepers that pay us a pretty decent penny to have hives on our farms, because he said there's no other farms around that come anywhere close to producing the amount of honey that ours do, because there's always something right close for them to feed on. Okay, air pollution is another problem. Most conventional farmers don't even think about it. Oh, it's just those people out there that care about pollution. I mean, we just need to do what we need to do. And so they fight restrictions, burning restrictions, and they continue to burn off trash like residue. Again, we have to get our water from one end of the field to the other. So most farmers, conventional farmers' solution to that is burn off stubble after harvest, so they have a nice clean bed there to till and get the water to flow good. Regenerative ag says, just don't disturb it. That's what will actually make your water be able to flow. Keep living roots there. Use cover crops to capture carbon and get Peyton to pay you for it. Okay, so another problem is lack of grazing. We run 200 mother cows in the summer months. They're on a forest permit in the high country. From October through May, they are on our farms. We're very committed to not feeding hay to our cattle. We produce thousands of tons of high quality horse hay that we sell as a cash crop, and we graze our cattle all winter long on corn stalks or residue or stockpiled pastures. Conventional ag solution to a lack of grazing is to buy more hay. You just that's the solution, and of course get more farmland so you can raise more hay to feed your cows in the winter. And regenerative ag solution is, well, just keep something growing. You can't have hay to feed if you don't have something growing, right? And of course, cover crops to graze on any time of the year. Okay, here's another problem: the future of agriculture. And of course, conventional ag solution is to go to the coffee shop and complain about how terrible things are, and to get a job in town, and to spend all kinds of time trying to get money, help, whatever. Regenerative ag solution to the future of agriculture is to buy more farmland, use the extra income to buy more farmland, and to stack enterprises and diversify. So in our operation, we're raising thousands of tons of hay to sell. We're raising corn to sell the cash crop of grain, and wheat for cash crop, and raise some cover crop seed for sale. And then we feed 200 cows and or 400 head of cattle most of the winter on the residue or the cover crops that we're growing in addition to cash crops. A lot of people want to think that I promote cover crops instead of cash crops. I think there's a good place for that. In our case, we're never planting a cover crop instead of a cash crop. We're growing our corn crop and then planting a cover crop after. We're growing a wheat crop and then planting a diverse cover crop after. So there's always something growing, but we're never taking land out of cash production to just have a cover crop. And we are competing with Wall Street investors who are buying up farmland on the West Slope for the water. We are also buying farmland, and we are paying that off by farming regeneratively. It is quite possible. I have a direct quote out of the Associated Press in 2020, and it embarrasses me as a farmer to say this, but the quote was, "Thanks to the government paying nearly 40% of their income, U.S. farmers are expected to end 2020 with the best net income in 7 years." So I think this sums it up. My 8-year-old daughter made me this little bookmarker. I don't know if you can see what it is, but on the left there are seed bags. And on the right is a Gallagher fence reel. And I think we're in the greatest industry in the world, where we're harnessing and capturing free solar energy. And we're using it to feed the world, all the while improving our soil and building soil for the next generation of farmers. And the thing that I am challenged with is, you know, a conventional farmer uses maybe 180 days out of the year to grow a crop. So why would we use 180 days to deplete our soil, our most valuable resource, when we could be doing a much better job by improving the soil and capturing carbon 320 days out of the year? 365. Now we have some cloudy days, but on our farm we have something growing all the time, whether it's a cash crop or a cover crop. We often follow the combine with the no-till planter, and we're planting in the same field, we're harvesting the cash crop. And so we're wanting to make sure that every day that the pump is turned on and we are pumping carbon. That's what I have to share with you.
Okay, a couple questions for you, Lowell. Did you start with some small changes, or did you go all in?
Yes and no. I'm a risk taker. So we bought a no-till drill in 2016 because we weren't sure how it would work with furrow irrigating. And then if you're interested in learning more about our equipment, you can talk to me. I'll be here the rest of the day, but we developed some equipment, and now we're selling that equipment to other farmers. So that was one of our biggest hang-ups of just going all in, is we weren't sure how we were going to get the water from one end of the field to the other with all the residue. So that was in 2016. By 2019, we had figured out some of this equipment, and we sold several $100,000 worth of high horsepower tractors and tillage equipment in 2019. So in 3 years, we were fully committed. And the best thing I tell farmers that are converting and switching to regenerative practices is to just sell your tillage equipment. That way you're just not tempted.
All right, next question. How long did it take you to reduce your cheatgrass?
Well, so we changed practices in 2016. We've been about at the 8 growing seasons. We saw it start to change probably in about 4 years, and we still see it just a little bit, but I expect at the rate it has changed, I expect that within 2 or 3 years, we won't have cheatgrass in any of our irrigated acres if it continues to change like it has.
All right, so there's a question here with some local context. There's a lot of farmers who lease land from either the city or the county on short-term leases. So the question is, how do you justify taking a risk if you only have a 3-year farm lease with the local government?
Sure. The economics in our case, and I'm not trying to say that people need to model the cash crop, the cattle, the horse hay, our system that we've developed. Everybody needs to do what works on their own operation. In our case, it makes no difference if I have a 1-year lease or a 10-year lease, or if it's my own farm that I own and want to pass on to my children. It makes no difference. The economics are there to do it in our case. I've had that excuse from a lot of neighboring farmers. Well, that makes sense because you own your farm. I can see making this investment, but for me, and think about this, why do I own my farm and they rent all their farmland, right? But for me, it doesn't make sense because I don't know if I'll be farming that in 5 years. It might be houses, right? Well, it makes no difference. The economics are there to do it right.
So next question, how do you talk to your neighbors about your regenerative practices, and do you have a community group?
It always bothers me when I hear people saying that all my neighbors, after 10 years of doing something like this, are still doing it the way they always were. Personally, I can't experience what I did on our own operation and not just talk to my neighbors, get right in their face about it. Like, guys, there's a better way. And there's thousands of acres of farmland that have converted just right there in our, Fruita Mac Loma area. We have field days we offer as part of Lifetime Ag, and the business I'm part of. We started up, I didn't want to be in the retail business, but we started it up because we had farmers wanting access to the equipment and access to seed. And so we started this little side deal out of my little lean-to shed, and it's grown into a huge, more than we could have ever imagined in just a few years. And so we're trying to help. We talk to neighbors. We do field days. We offer them all the tools that we have found useful to make the transition on our farm, so that the only excuse they have is the psychological, what Elizabeth talked about. That's the only excuse they're left with.
So after all the changes you've already made, what are some future changes you hope to adopt or implement on your farm?
I like attending conferences like this and learning new ideas. Agrivoltaics intrigue me highly for great running pastured poultry and solar together. We definitely use more and more biologicals and less synthetic inputs. So that's probably the main thing.
All right, we'll just hit you with a few more. What cover crops have worked best at suppressing weeds and improving your fungal to bacteria ratio?
Honestly, I don't know, because so the best answer to that is the more diversity you can have for the growing season you have to put it in, the better. So the one we love is we harvest wheat in July, and then we have from July through the beginning of November till we will have our first killing frost. And so we just plant 18 species mixes that is for cattle grazing and soil health improvement. So very much so, the more diversity in the cover crop, the better. Also, the earlier planted, and that's our commitment to having the grain drill in the field with the combine, just like we would a grain cart to capture the grain. We've got our grain drill there to get the next crop growing before those, because when you run the combine in July, so it's shaded over, the ground is partly covered, and you run that combine and it's 100 degrees and then there's any moisture there, that immediately triggers weed seeds to germinate. Hey, there's sunlight, I'm gonna germinate. We'll just get there, 5 minutes before the light turns on with the weed and plant a cover crop and have that cover crop be triggered by that light and opportunity. So that's the number one.
When you first started making some changes, did you see yield reductions in your cash crops in the first few years?
Yes and no. Where we love, and I try to, other farmers, wherever they can, there's a lot of hay production in our valley. And so wherever you can just have hay, alfalfa field that's been no-till for 6 years already because it just hasn't been disturbed, just go plant corn following alfalfa. So in that case, absolutely none. In fact, most times a better crop right away. And this is where the mindset needs to shift, because a conventional farmer, he doesn't understand these 6 soil health principles very well, the diversity and crop rotation and all that. And a lot of farmers in our area grow corn after corn after corn. And then they finally figure out how to break out of that, and then they grow hay. And so if a farmer wants to transition, we try hard to get them to not. Another common one is harvest wheat in July, let the field sit fallow, and then plant wheat again in October. And they, now that there's some guys, a lot of guys transitioning, they want to go no-till wheat into wheat stubble in the fall. And I say, don't do it that way. Like, you're going to be disappointed. So that's the hard part. If you do that kind of stuff, yes, you will have reduction. You will have more pest pressure. Yeah.
Okay, last question. How do you feel about federal payments for fallowing fields on the Colorado River to help with the water shortage versus producers being more efficient with their water? What policy changes would you recommend?
Don't ask me that kind of questions. I'll try to keep it short and sweet here, but I have never accepted a single dollar of government or federal money to make this transition. And I want to be clear that if somebody wants to use a program to do that, I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but it is not necessary. The part that I have a problem with this, it's going on right in our area. And when you understand the 6 soil health principles and see how well they work when you implement them all, this is one of the worst things that can ever be done in the overall problem, because fallow is the best way to destroy soil biology. So why would you pay farmers to destroy soil biology because you have a water shortage?